All right, who in here has heard of a guy named Melchizedek? Anyone heard of Melchizedek? Yeah, that's what I thought. He's in the Bible. It's funny because he's in the Bible for very short. Like, it's like a one paragraph. His appearance is like one paragraph. It's super short. And yet, they talk about him, and they talk about Jesus in relationship to him. So I was like, his name just keeps coming up to me. Like, I just keep hearing it and seeing it everywhere I go, which is really weird because until recently, I had never heard of this guy, right? So I'll tell you the story. So remember Abraham, when he left his family, he took Lot with him because he was like, oh, I've got to be a great nation, I don't have any kids. So he took Lot, kind of thinking that Lot would be like his way of having lots of kids. Lot was his nephew. So as they get kind of settled, Lot settles in Sodom and Gomorrah area. And these 4 kings come, and they take Lot captive and all the people, and they vanquish all the people, and they take them away. And Abraham's like, oh, no, you don't. You don't kidnap my nephew. So Abraham musters his people, and they go and defeat all the kings and rescue Lot. Huzzah! And they're coming back home, and they've got all this loot. They've got all, they took all the stuff from the kings, and they've got all this money and jewels and cows and whatever they came home with. So as they're on their way home, they camp out one night outside this little town called Salem, which meant peace. We call it Jerusalem. And as they're camping, this guy Melchizedek comes out. Melchizedek was a high priest and the king of Salem. And so he brought bread and wine, and they hang out. He hangs out with Abraham, and they sit around the campfire and talk and tell jokes and war stories and whatever, men do around a campfire. And then Abraham gives Melchizedek 10% of all that he's just found and won. He gives him essentially a tithe of his victory, and Melchizedek gives him a blessing. And I'm reading this story, and I'm like, why? Why did Abraham give this guy, who he doesn't really know, who's not a king over him necessarily, why did he give him this money? It seems very strange to me. Well, Melchizedek was a priest and a king. And while he was not Abraham's priest and king, he was still a priest who believed in God the Creator, like our one true God. So my opinion is that Abraham gave Melchizedek the money because Melchizedek was a representative of God, and Abraham was recognizing that it was because of God that he was victorious. I mean, Abraham just in his family went and defeated 4 kings. And that seems to me like a pretty big, I don't know how many people were in Abraham's family, but that seems like a pretty big feat to me, that he was able with this, I imagine, this small force to take out 4 kingdoms worth of kings. And Abraham recognized that that was the grace of God. So he was giving the money to Melchizedek like he was giving it to God. That's my opinion. The Bible doesn't say that. That's just my personal opinion of what happened there. Okay? Because Melchizedek is a priest. And we're going to talk today about how Jesus was a priest. So last week we talked about prophet. Jesus is a prophet. So prophets hear the word of God and then tell it to people. Priests kind of work in the opposite. Priests hear the word of the people and take it to God. Priests in the Old Testament were people who were intermediaries between God and the people. Okay, so we are all Americans, but if I call up the White House and I'm like, hey, I'd like to talk to Joe. Can I chat with Joe today? They'll be like, no. They're not going to let me have the ear of the president because I'm just a nobody, right? So we have senators and congressmen who are intermediaries. Their job is to take our concerns, our things that we think and feel. Roxanne's like, yeah, sure they do. Okay, they don't always do a great job. Their job is to take what we want, what we think. I can call Mitch McConnell and I could talk to Mitch. It might take a while, but I do get emails from them because I email them and they do eventually email me back. So they will entertain what we say. He and I don't always agree, but he will take my email and read it, or one of his people will, right? And then their job is to go to Washington and be the intermediary for us. Okay, so we priests in the Old Testament were kind of like our senators and congressmen. They were the people who they were the ones who could go into the Holy of Holies. They could go into the temple, into the holiest area of the temple and speak to God, and they were allowed in there. They were consecrated for that work. So they were kind of the representatives of the people to the Lord. And Jesus was a priest. It was said he was a priest. I'll show you. It says in Hebrews, therefore, since we have a great high priest who has ascended into heaven, Jesus, the Son of God, let us hold firmly to the faith that we profess. For we do not have a high priest who is unable to empathize with our weakness, but we have one who has been tempted in every way, just as we are, yet he did not sin. So let us then approach God's throne of grace with confidence, so that we might receive mercy and find grace to help us in our time of need. So we have Jesus. He is our great high priest. So we have a relationship. When we surrender ourselves to Jesus, we have a relationship with him. So Jesus is hanging out in the throne room. You know, he's hanging out in the Oval Office of heaven, if you will. And we, because we know Jesus, we have access, right? Like I can call up, I can talk to Jesus and be, Jesus, I got this thing that I want to talk to you about. And he's like, yeah, come on in, let's have lunch. And he wants to talk to me. Okay, be kind of like if I was friends with Jill Biden, I could have lunch with Jill and be like, man, Jill, there's this stuff going on in schools. You get it, because she was higher education. She's an education person. I'm like, we've got this problem in schools. Can you go talk to Joe about it? And she went, like in the Jesus scenario, she would be like, he's too important for you. She'd be like, yeah, sure, let me go chat with him. Let's see what we can do. So I have a problem. If I have an issue, I can go to the throne room. I have access through Jesus. I can go to Jesus and be like, hey, Jesus, let's have lunch. Let's chat. And then he takes my concern to the Father for me, which is pretty cool, right? So he is our high priest. He's our representative because he's been where we are, because he's been born in flesh and been tempted. He understands us, and he is therefore our representative. It says in 1 Timothy, for there is one God, and there is one mediator between God and men, the man Jesus Christ. So he was a man, and he was a priest, and he's holy. So he's all these things, and because he has membership into all these clubs of being human and being part of the Trinity, he is kind of like our link between us and God, which is pretty swift. So what does that mean to us? That's great, Stephanie. Jesus is priest. Okay, I get it. So how does that affect me? What does that mean for my life? Well, if I'm a Christian, that means I am a mini Christ. So that means it's my job now to be an intermediary between those who do not believe and take their concerns and thoughts and things I see here going on in the earth and go to Jesus and be like, hey, Jesus, can we chat? Hey, Jesus, I see this concern over here. Can you please go talk to your dad about it? And because Jesus is good and loving, he's not like, Stephanie, we have too many other things to do. He's like, yeah, sure. I'll go talk to my dad about that for you. It says that he's there praying with us and for us at all times. He is constantly interceding for us in the heavenly realm. He is constantly going to the big, the Oval Office of heaven and chatting with the Lord about the concerns that we take to him. So it is one of our jobs as priests, as mini priests, like I am pastor, and so I'm a teacher up here, but I am no more holy than any of you. Okay, like all of us have access to Jesus because of our belief in him as our Redeemer, right? So our job is when you see stuff happening, bad stuff, we see hurt, we see pain, we see cancer, we see brokenheartedness, we see broken relationships, we go to Jesus and we're like, Jesus, we need you here. Can you talk to your dad about doing something about this problem we got going on here? So that's my first challenge, is to take your role as priest, to go to the Father and to say, hey, these are some current concerns we have. Another job of priests in the Old Testament, if you look at the Old Testament, was they apologized to God for the sins of the people. Now, fortunately for us, we are post-Jesus and we don't have to behead any doves. I'm really grateful for that. I'm really glad that I don't have to be a butcher up here. Back in the day, you guys would be bringing me all kinds of goats and chickens and doves, and I'd have to slaughter them, and that's just gross. So I'm glad we don't have to do that. I'm very grateful. My dad was talking about he got a deer this week. He had to gut it, and I'm like I would not want to have to do that. But that's what priests used to do. People would bring their payment for their sin to the priest, and the priest would accept it on behalf of the Father, just like Melchizedek accepted the loot from Abraham as kind of a payment, if you will, for the victory that Abraham had. So they also came and they apologized for the people on behalf and like they would kind of go to God and be like, God, I know my people messed up this week, this month, this year. They really did all these bad things. Would you please forgive them? Okay? It'd be kind of like if I had someone on trial and like I went to, if I was friends with the judge's son, and I went to the judge's son and be like, hey, I know that what they did was wrong, but can you cut them a break? You know, they've really kind of like, I know they screwed up. I'm not saying they didn't, but like, could you maybe show them some mercy, you know, for me as a favor? That's kind of what we have to do then on behalf of the people around us. So when you see sin happening around us, within us ourselves, and in memberships that you are part of, then you come to the Lord and say, hey, we've messed up. They've messed up. Would you please forgive us? So like if your company doesn't always do things with integrity, you could come before the Lord and say, Lord, I realize that we don't operate with integrity. I apologize on behalf of my company for our being swindlers or being, you know, not always operating in the up and up. I apologize for that. Would you please forgive us and help us to be a company of integrity? Or if in your family you have unforgiveness or bitterness, be like, Lord, I realize that in our family, we constantly sin and judge people. Could you please forgive the Jones family for our sin of unforgiveness and help us to be people of mercy and grace? Or like the United States of America, let's be real, we're pretty prideful people as a nation. We kind of think we're the best nation and the best at everything. So we could go to the Lord and be like, Lord, I realize that as a nation, we're very prideful. And as an American, because I'm an American, like I have say-so over the American people, be like, Lord, could you please forgive us for our pride and our hubris and help us to be people of humility? So our job as priests is twofold. It is to bring the concerns of the people to the Lord and to apologize to the Lord on behalf of organizations that you're a part of. So those are your two jobs. That's your homework for the week. I'm going to close us out with this verse. You are a chosen people, all of you. You are a chosen people. You are a royal priesthood. We, all of us who believe in the Lord, are a royal priesthood. We are part of a holy nation. We are God's special possession, so that we might declare the praises of him who called you out of the darkness into the wonderful light. Once we were not a people, but now we are. We are people of God. And once you had not received mercy, but now we receive mercy because of what Jesus did for us. The end. And all of God's people said, Amen. I thought there was more to that verse, and I was like, nope, and we're done.